Hey, what's up, guys? It's Bakes here, and thank you for joining me for this episode of Ranked, where I'll be ranking my favourite albums from the year prior, being 2024. I love this time of year. I love getting to look back at the year prior and all the music and albums and releases that we got, and get to share them with you guys and, see what we had in common. If you guys also liked these albums or checked them out or whatever, I always love doing these videos when the year comes to an end. Now, as usual, in my intro, before I get into my actual ranking, I'll do a quick little overview. What were my complete thoughts of the year 2024 and the music that we got and the releases and what the overall quality was, in my opinion. I actually don't think 2024 was that bad, and I say that bad because about halfway through I was like, it's definitely a step down from 2023, and I still do think that. I thought the year prior, 2023, was really good. We had a lot of great albums and releases that year, and now looking back, even though, again, as I said, it's definitely a step down, now that the year's fully wrapped up and I can look back at it as a whole, I actually don't think it was that bad. I feel like we got a really good handful of at least solid and above average albums through the year. I think it will be a year where, a couple of years down the track, or maybe 5, 6, something like that, I look back at 2024 and I go, you know what, it was actually fairly solid, and it's definitely not as disappointing as what I first thought it was going to be when we were about halfway through. Something else I would normally do in this intro after I do my overview of the year is I would list the albums that I checked out but didn't quite make my list, but I'm not going to do that this year because I listened to so much new music in 2024. It's ridiculous. It's the most I've ever fucking locked in and gone ape shit checking out new stuff. So I'm actually not going to do that this year because the list is that fucking long. It's insane. So I've actually starting to put together a list for the end of this month where I do my top 10 albums that I picked up and replayed through 2024. And if you know how I do that video, I don't include 2024 released albums. I pick up and talk about albums from years prior that I had on repeat through 2024. But like I said, I was listening to so many new releases that it was actually kind of hard to put that list together because I wasn't really listening to much older stuff. I was just going ape shit with all the new stuff. So I'm not going to be doing that in the intro this time around. We might as well get straight into ranking my list today. Today is going to be a list of 20 albums with a slight asterisk next to it, and you'll see why when we get into the ranking. But 20 albums to go through. As I said, a year looking back, maybe not as disappointing as it felt halfway through. Let me know what your thoughts of the year of music in 2024 was as an overall effort. And without delaying any longer, let's start off this ranking at the bottom of my list at my number 20. So starting off my list and coming in at my number 20 is one of those asterisk picks that I said would be coming up in my list. Here I have the EPs Volume 1, 2 and 3 by the band The Plot in You. Yes, I am counting all 3 EPs as one effort. If you're familiar with my channel and the way that I do my music content, I normally talk about EPs the same way as I would talk about a full-length album, and I do include them on album rankings, and I do them in my random album reviews and everything, so that's nothing too foreign for this channel. But I wouldn't normally include 3 EPs in one mention, but the reason why I've decided to do that is because all 3 EPs were released within the year of each other, and also it's a total of like 9 songs, so I feel like it's just easier to do all 3 together. But getting into the actual albums or EPs themselves, I actually wasn't too familiar with the band The Plot in You until probably early last year, but through this year I've heard so many people say that The Plot in You have had this really quick and crazy improvement with their music and their quality, and all the music that they're doing now is probably some of the best in their total discography. Listening to their new stuff, I'm probably not so in love as what a lot of other people are. I fell in love with the band because of their song Left Behind, which sort of put the band on my radar in general. It was one of my favourite songs of last year. If you checked out my top 20 tracks of 2023 video, you guys know that that made the cut, and if I was to redo that list, Left Behind would probably be even higher. I fucking love that song. And even comparing that song to the rest of the EPs here now, it does do a lot of the heavy lifting compared to the other 8 tracks. And not saying that the other 8 tracks are bad, but Left Behind is just levels above when comparing them to the other songs. But if I had to rank the 3 EPs here individually, Volume 1 just beats out Volume 3, and again, Left Behind being on Volume 1 probably does give it that slight edge. Volume 2 is easily the weakest of the trilogy for myself, but Volume 3 is the most diverse, with each song there feeling probably the most unique of the 9 total. Now, I did probably have a lot of mixed feedback while mentioning these 3 EPs that sort of makes it sound like I wasn't in love with it, and definitely I wasn't in love with the 3 total, but for 3 EPs, all consisting of 3 songs, 9 total, I did find myself coming back to this one a lot through the year, especially because one was released right at the start and one was released right at the end, so we were sort of getting a new song almost through like every month of the year. And I found myself just coming back to this and checking it out, and I was really enjoying it. And the Plotting You, as I said, they're sort of new on my radar, but they're definitely going to be a band that I'm coming back to in the future and checking out their new stuff. So coming in at my number 20 are the 3 EPs, Volume 1, 2 and 3 by the band The Plotting You.
Close my eyes, 'cause I can never get enough. Like the sun, it's time that I rise up.
Coming in at my number 19, I have the album Heaven X Hell, or Heaven and Hell, however you want to say it, by the band Sum 41. Now, to be honest, I did mostly grab this album because it's supposed to be the last Sum 41 album before they retire. And regardless of your personal thoughts on the band, they have shaped and left a massive legacy on the pop-punk genre and the rock genre and all the sounds and scenes that they've been a part of. For me personally, I am a fan of Sum 41. If I had to rank them on my list of like favorite bands overall, they would probably just maybe make it into my top 20, which I know that still is a pretty big margin, but I listen to so many bands, making the top 20 is still a really clean cut. But they were meant to play live at Good Things Festival, which I was at last year, but they pulled out because Derek was sick, and that honestly really did hurt and, left me feeling a bit bummed because that could have potentially been the last time I could see Sum 41 live. I'd never seen them live before, and, it's just going to be weird knowing that they're not a band and, we're not going to have any more new music from Sum 41, but like I said, final release, or supposed to be their final release before they retire, and technically kind of 2 albums, Heaven being on one disc and Hell being on the other, both have 10 songs each, and different kind of vibes between the 2 albums as well. So if you want to listen to them in separate sittings, you will get kind of different tones. With Heaven, the vibe is a bit more fast-paced pop-punk, sort of like their earlier stuff, while Hull is a bit more heavy and brooding, kind of like what they were doing off some of their later albums. But also listening to them together still kind of works with nothing feeling too out of place. So if you want to listen to the 2 discs together in one big sitting, at least it's got that going for it as well. A total of 20 songs between the 2 discs. Sometimes it did feel like it was going by pretty quick considering it's 20 songs, but then other times, I'm not going to lie, it did kind of drag. I think it kind of depended on my mood and my mindset going into it. But like I said, I mostly grabbed this for the fact that it's meant to be the band's final album, and overall it's not too bad. It's just kind of very fine. A lot of it is passable, and like I said, just sort of fine. Nothing there really does floor me at all. It doesn't come close to what is considered to be, some of the band's best albums, All Killer No Filler, Does This Look Infected, it doesn't come on that sort of level, but for what it is and the legacy and, what brought it here and being Sum 41's final album, I don't feel like it's overly disappointing or anything like that. It's an enjoyable enough album. So coming in at my number 19, I have Heaven and Hell by the band Sum 41. Coming into my number 18 is the album Saviors by the band Green Day. Now, admittedly, based off this album's quality, it does not deserve to be this low in the ranking. But like I said, I base my rankings on personal favourites and what I was coming back to most through the year. But like I said, if I'm basing it on quality, it doesn't deserve to be this low. It's actually a fairly solid enough album. Like Revolution Radio, another album by Green Day, this is an underrated later entry in the band's discography. But if I'm still comparing the two, I do think Revolution Radio is better, but also got to take into consideration that album's had more time to grow on me. This album, though it is actually fairly strong, and I do feel kind of bad by saying this, but these classic iconic bands, same could be said for the previously mentioned Sum 41, and Spoilers, an upcoming Offspring album that's going to be in this ranking. Just knowing what these bands are capable of in their prime, these new albums just sort of kind of pale in comparison. Maybe a better way of describing that is like, if I want to listen to a Green Day album, there are other albums that I'm going to go to, even though this album is still fairly solid. There's just other ones that are more go-to ones, Dookie and American Idiot, which kind of leaves these albums that are still fairly solid, just kind of in this weird limbo, and just sort of puts it in this category of being kind of passable and another decent entry in their latest discography, but just not one that I'm going to come back to all of the time. But like I said, still a solid entry and deserves to probably be higher if I'm basing this ranking on quality. I'm going to go see Green Day in March. I'm really excited because they're going to be playing Dookie and American Idiot in full, but they are going to throw a bit of Saviors through the mix apparently, and I'm not going to be disappointed by that. Like I said, this is an album that probably deserves to be higher on this ranking, and I did think it was going to be, but I just didn't come back to it as much as others. And like I said, if I do feel like listening to Green Day, there's just going to be other albums that I pull off the shelf. But don't let that turn you away if you've been turned off new Green Day, especially after their previous album before this one, Father of All Motherfuckers, which was really bad. This album is a good return to form. So coming in at my number 18 is the album Saviors by Green Day. Coming into my number 17 was an album that I wasn't able to pick up through the year, but here I have State Champ's self-titled album, State Champs. As a pop punk fan, I've never actually been that big on State Champs, even though they're sort of a modern staple when it comes to pop punk music, so it's kind of weird I've never been that into them. There's just something that's always sort of, stopped me from getting crazy deep into them. I own one of their albums, but just overall, a lot of their stuff hasn't really clicked with me. It's just a little too polished, and I don't know, there's just something missing there. But I've always made sure to check out their new stuff whenever they release an album, because every now and then there's a pretty solid song. Just their overall albums, majority of the time don't really click with me, but I found myself kind of enjoying this one. There is not a bad song on this album, but also not any great songs either, which is kind of weird. Listening to this album front to back is just kind of this experience that is just very fine and very neutral. Though nothing is offensively bad or ridiculously good, I do feel like this album does improve as it goes along, and it gets better as the track list goes through, especially with the closing back catalogue. I know this one was very brief and, I didn't go too far against this one, but like I said, listening to this one, it's very neutral and it was very fine, and just overall from front to back it was passable, and it was something that I did enjoy. It was also one that I was listening to later in the year, so it only just kind of made the cut for this ranking. But coming in at my number 7 is State Champs and their self-titled State Champs. At my number 16, I have the album King of the Mischievous South Volume 2 by Denzel Curry. Now, you guys know I'm not big into rap and, the hip-hop culture and what's going on in that scene and whatever. I just like music, so when I hear something that I like, I pick it up and check it out and whatever. And I'm a big fan of Denzel Curry. He's probably my favourite modern/current rapper making music and everything. This album is coming off his previous album, Melt My Eyes, See a Future, which a lot of people really fucking dug that album. I do own it, so I like it enough to obviously own it, but I wasn't as high on it as a lot of other people were. But I do feel like, for my personal taste, this album was an improvement. At first, I was really thinking that it was a return to form, to something like Taboo and sort of the feels and style that we got off that album. And I say Taboo because that's my personal favourite Denzel Curry album. But I eventually got to a point where I was listening to King of the Mischievous South and I was going, it really isn't. It really isn't a return to the same level of Taboo and same sort of style and sound. But it doesn't mean that this is a bad album. It's its own thing. Taboo to me is just so unique and so brooding, and it's got so much personality and style. I fucking love Taboo from front to back. This one's not as good, but like I said, it being its own thing is okay as well. I enjoyed much more of the beats and the flows and just overall songs off this one compared to, like I said, the previous Melt My Eyes, See Your Future, which a lot of people dug. But I really liked this one. It's probably my second favourite Denzel Curry album now, and I had a good time checking this one out through the years. So coming in at my number 16 is King of the Mischievous South Volume 2 by Denzel Curry.
I kept my end of the deal. I will tell you how to feel, but the rest, that's on you.
Coming in at number 15, I have the band Hockey Dad and their album Rebuild, Repeat. I've never been too massive on Hockey Dad. They're just not in a go-to genre for myself, being like indie, surf, rock. Some albums I have enjoyed and then others haven't really been my thing. I mean, considering the subgenre that they're in, they're kind of one of my favourites from that subgenre, but as I said, just not a go-to of mine. The last album of theirs that I really enjoyed from front to back was Blend In, but this could be my new favourite from the band. I really mean that, especially since the opening portion of this album is genuinely one of the strongest of the year, and I really mean that. Tracks 1 to 4 are like really solid. Every time I was listening to this album, occasionally it would be on loop just because I'm at work and I'm busy and whatever. Every time the album was closing, I'm like, oh yes, get back around to those opening 4 because they're really fucking good. Though the rest aren't terrible, it definitely dies off as it goes on. Tracks That's On You and Seething kind of being the two solid exceptions from that back half. But for indie surf rock, again, that kind of isn't my go-to genre. It's solid enough for revisits whenever I'm in the mood and feeling like something like that. And like I said, probably my new favourite Hockey Dad album. So coming in at my number 15 is Rebuild, Repeat.
Is there anything you wanna talk about? You said like what? I said don't play around. You said just leave it alone.
Coming in at number 14, I have Australian singer-songwriter Amy Shark and her third album, Sunday Sadness. Now, I was a little bit cautious with this album as I like Amy Shark's first album, but over time it has been one that's kind of died off for me. I don't like it as much as I used to, and I don't listen to it as much as I used to. And overall, I didn't really enjoy her second album at all, but I also don't really remember it too well. But the singles for this third album did actually have me pretty intrigued to check this one out. You know, songs like Can I Shower at Yours and Beautiful Eyes. I was like, okay, this could actually be something pretty cool. I'm excited for this third album. The first half of the album is actually fairly solid considering the type of music it is, and, something that wouldn't normally be the genre that I go to. Tracks 1 to 6 all feel like they have a bit more variety and flavour, especially compared to her previous work off previous albums. As the album goes from that point, it does slowly return to form of her previous work. Still better, just not as strong as what the first half of this album is. When I say return to form of her previous work, the main issues that I have with her early stuff is kind of her songwriting and the lyrics. To me, it just sort of sounds like teen girl in high school writing fan fiction on WhatsApp. Does anyone know the app WhatsApp? It was like, in my school at least, when I was in high school, that's the app that all the girls used to write fan fictions and whatever. it kind of gives me that vibes. If you want an example of this album, check out the song Babe and just listen to the lyrics. Ugh, like it kind of makes me squirm. But either way, overall, I do think this is an improvement upon previous efforts, including the first album, which, like I said, once upon a time, I did like much more than I do now, but I clearly feel like this is definitely Amy Shark's best album to date. I feel like it's got a good step above what once was her best, and I might need to go back and revisit that second album again, because like I said, it has been a long time. Yes, I didn't like it, but opinions change over time, and honestly, Sunday Sadness, this album is ranking much higher than what I first thought it was going to. So coming in at my number 14 is Sunday Sadness by Amy Shark. Coming in at number 13, I have the album Supercharged by The Offspring. Now, I did briefly mention this album earlier when I brought up Green Day, saying a big band with a good album, but in comparison to their best in their discography, it just sort of falls into this limbo of being just sort of passable. But this album is short and sharp, and honestly, I wouldn't have minded if it was actually a little bit longer, where if I'm comparing it to Green Day's album, for example, Saviors, at moments that album does sort of drag. It has 15 songs, this one, as I said, shorter with only 10. And again, this album does have genuinely good moments through it, but the edge is given to this album if I'm comparing it to, again, Green Day and Sum 41's albums, because this one is like really fun. Examples of fun songs off this album, we have the leading track, Looking Out for Number One. We have Come to Brazil, the leading track, Make It Alright. Though I probably would have went with songs like Fall Guy or You Can't Get There From Here as better options for leading singles instead, because I feel like they're more better examples of like genuinely good songs compared to Make It Alright, which is a fun song, but I see a lot of people sort of getting turned off this album because of the tone of Make It Alright. You know, put in a better example of like a genuinely good song, and I feel like more people would have been interested in this album. Now, again, like Green Day and Sum 41, I'm sort of going to be comparing it to those bands through the rest of this brief review. It's not the band's best, and again, it's sort of a passable late entry in a great discography from The Offspring, but it's just got more fun and flair compared to the other two that I keep bringing up. And comparing it to Saviors and Heaven and Hell, this one kind of does honestly feel like the most nothing, and what I mean by that is it sort of has this sort of carelessness to it, but also it probably is the least amount of pressure when you're comparing it to the other two. You know, Green Day needed to bounce back from a career worst album. Sum 41 want to end their career on a high. The Offspring sort of have nothing to lose, so they're just out there having fun. As I said, it probably feels the most careless out of the three that I keep bringing up, but it's fun, it's short, it's sharp. I'm just going to sort of leave that one there. So coming in at my number 13 is The Offspring's Supercharged. Coming in at my number 12, here I have the album The Death of Slim Shady, Coup de Grace by the rapper Eminem. A white boy that is barely into rap, that enjoys Eminem, I know, shocker, but all jokes aside, I do think this album was a nice return to form and a fairly solid overall album in terms of quality here for Eminem. Now, I did hear mixed things upon this album's release, you know, a lot of people saying Eminem is back, but then there was also plenty of negatives, and those negatives ranging from feeling like this album's too dated, hanging on past success, you know, trying to match the style and tone of, you know, some of his older tracks that really worked for him, trying too hard to be controversial and cancel commentary, and I don't know, my thoughts on these things, it feeling dated, you know, I don't really care when artists or bands go back and, you know, try and match like old sounds and things that worked for them and whatever, and especially when so much time has passed since, you know, early Eminem and stuff like that, you know, you might as well go back and give us that nostalgia feeling, you know, try and match that style and sound and whatever. I don't really care. Trying hard to be controversial, I mean, I feel like that's the whole point of this album if you were listening to it. And the cancel commentary, this is something that did kind of make me laugh. I saw a lot of memes where people were saying like, why does Eminem keep saying, oh, people are going to try and cancel me, stop trying to cancel me and whatever. It's like, no one's trying to cancel you. It did make me laugh because it's kind of true, no one was trying to cancel him at the time of this album's drop. But at the same time, I do feel like because he's saying stop trying to cancel me and all this, it's sort of putting a stop to people saying, because, you know, if they do, they're just sort of proving him right. I don't know, that's sort of my takes on it, but not like this album is banger after banger or anything like that, but it does have a nice variety. It balances well with, you know, what I was saying before, sounds that sort of worked for him in the past, tracks like Houdini and Brand New Dance, but then, you know, there's some more current feeling tracks on this album as well. Toby, Antichrist. Not like it's a go-to genre of mine. Like I said, I'm not massive into rap. I got to be sort of in the mood for it. But this is above average when it comes to rap albums for me. Good quality for a later entry in Eminem's discography. So coming in at my number 12, I have The Death of Slim Shady, Coup de Grace by Eminem. Coming in at my number 11 and just missing my top 10, here I have the album Heaven Can Wait by the band Trash Boat. I haven't listened to Trash Boat much since their pop punk days. Their first two albums, the first being Nothing I Write You Can Change What You've Been Through, and their second being Crown Shyness. That was sort of when they were in their pop punk territory. To be fair, they were very heavy for pop punk, but they were sort of in that sound. And it had been a while since I sort of checked out their newer stuff, but with the build up for this new album and the teasers of their leading singles, it just got me very interested and I got really excited to check out this new album. Their newer sound, I always describe it as sounding like Boston Manor, because Boston Manor is a band that I'm very familiar with, but it is a lot more into like a heavier nature than Boston Manor. But getting back into this album either way, it has good pace, good flow. It never feels like it's dragging at all. Fairly good consistency. There are no bad songs, but I would say there are a handful that are at least average, you know, something like that. But the top tier songs on this album, when they hit fucking hard. There are a lot of bangers on this one to check out for sure. While I've got it here, probably my favourite artwork of the year as well. How beautiful does that album cover look? I fucking love it. I'm obsessed with it. But this album, like I said, just missed out on my top 10 for a long portion of the year. It was in there, but you know, just as I was putting my list together, it just moved down a few rankings and whatever, which is a bit of a bummer because it's an album that I do really enjoy talking about and have enjoyed listening to. So coming in at my number 11 is Heaven Can Wait by the band Trash Boat.
Thinking that I'm not enough. So call it off, tell me it won't last. There's never been a time that we wouldn't run back. To get lost in the middle.
And getting into my top 10 and coming in at my number 10 spot is the EP Shit Yeah by Between You and Me. Many components made this one a hard one to rate. First of all, it being an EP of only 6 songs. It being catchy but not top tier, you know, compared to what I know the band can do. Nothing below average, but it does feel like there are moments of filler within a 6-track playlist, which isn't many at all. It is the first project since the band went independent as well, after leaving their previous label Hopeless Records. And first thoughts upon listening to this EP and first half of the year was kind of like, this is a major step down from what was a great sophomore album. The singles were good, but overall felt kind of safe and run by the numbers. Honestly, the first half of the year, this EP was like extremely low on this ranking. Like the first half, I was just kind of like, oh, do I even want it here? I wasn't really listening to it much. But over time, and you know, the more I gave it a chance, and especially after seeing them live again through the year, this was the second time seeing them headline, but I've seen them countless times live. The infectiousness and the fun of this EP just started to hit, and it just kind of got in my bloodstream, and I'm like, fuck, I think I kind of love this EP. Songs like Nevermind always worked for me. In the Middle skyrocketed for me. I fucking love that track now. Kill My Vibe is solid enough. Yeah is a generic as fuck track, but it is also like catchy as hell. Like I can't fucking not admit that at all. It just became the fact of giving into it and admitting, yeah, it is kind of standard for an EP, but it's just fun, it's catchy, and 4 out of 6 of the songs have got me vibing along constantly whenever I hear them. Two of the tracks do feel like filler a little bit, which is not a great feeling when it's a track list of only 6 songs and a quarter of them just feel like they're there to round it out and make it a bit more stacked, a bit more meaty. But overall, like I said, this one just became too infectious to ignore, just cracked into my top 10, and it does feel weird having an EP this high, only being 6 songs and whatever, but I mean, shit, it just, like I said, got into my bloodstream and I can't deny it. So coming in at my number 10 is Shit Yeah by Between You and Me. Coming in at my number 9, I have the album Mutation by Red Hook. It's only been a year since Red Hook's surprise debut album, Postcards from a Living Hell, which that album was fun as hell. As I said, it was a big surprise from last year, and it was one of the albums I was hyping mostly last year. That album was fucking awesome. And usually 2 albums in roughly the span of a year within each other makes me a little bit nervous. It makes me nervous because I feel like I'd probably prefer a band to take their time with another album, make sure that it's something that they're really proud of and works. And not saying that they weren't proud of this or whatever, but just such a rush. It feels like they're just trying to get something out for the sake of having something out. I don't know, it just kind of makes me nervous. But the quality of this album is probably just about the same as the first. I'm maybe slightly less hyped on this one in comparison for a few reasons. One, because it is so similar, which kind of sounds like a weird complaint to have because I loved the first album and I love this one, and it still kind of works and whatever, but maybe a slight change up and variety would have been appreciated a little bit. The singles for this album as well weren't hyping me up as much as the singles off the previous album as well. And honestly, I still feel like the singles on this album are the weaker moments. Like, the 2 opening tracks are singles, and they're fine. I don't have anything, too negative to say with the singles or whatever, but I feel like this album really hits its stride through the middle, especially tracks 3 to 6. They're like banger after banger, and that's a really good run that they have there. But then from then on, it's kind of on and off again. And like I said, not saying that the singles are bad or anything like that. I just feel like the back catalogue is a lot stronger. And this album also still has room to grow. It's one that came out very late in the year. And like I said, the quality is probably just the same as the first album, so I'm sure it'll get there just the more I listen to it. And again, it's still fun, and if you liked the fun chaos and frantic variety of their first album, you're gonna like the sequel. Like I said, there's just so much for every sort of subgenre in like the alternative scene. You've got like sort of new metal, and then you've got rapping, and then you've got pop punk, and then you've got like hardcore heavy metal stuff. Like, there's just a bit of everything there to like scratch every itch. Like, it's really fucking cool. I saw Red Hook for the first time live last year, and man, they were just fucking awesome. So my number 9 goes to Mutation by the band Red Hook. Coming in at my number 8 is the album Sundiver by the band Boston Manor. I've said this a lot on my channel, but Boston Manor have had this really consistent run of enjoyable albums, but nothing that's really blown me away or floored me. And it's still the same here. I know I kind of hyped it up like it was going to be something crazily different, but at least it's possibly the best overall album from their discography. It's close between this and Welcome to the Neighborhood. And I guess you could kind of throw Datura into that conversation, because Datura is also a really good album, but it's quite a bit shorter than the other 2. But I really do feel like this one's sort of taken the cake for probably best overall. The thing with this album, it's like hard to deny the amount of bangers on it. Like, I can just list the back here: Container, Sliding Doors, Heat Me Up. I'm going to throw you on an underrated track right now, a track called Dissolve. Really fucking cool. But there was like moments through the year where I was kind of forgetting about this album, but then I'd revisit it and then I just find myself like grooving and headbanging and just really feeling it. And I arranged a lot of moods and varieties there, but there is just so much variety on this album as well to match that. You know, you kind of have their standard stuff that you've heard before. Container, still really fucking good song, but you know, sort of matching their traditional sound. Sort of like groovy, almost like, lack of a better term, sexy stuff. A song like Horses in a Dream sort of matches that vibe. And then you've got heavy stuff as well, like Sliding Doors and whatever. I saw these guys open for Trophy Eyes when I went and watched Trophy Eyes, and that was like me banging my hand on the table for a ticket straight away, just knowing it was Trophy Eyes and Boston Manor. And as much as I love Trophy Eyes, you guys know how much I love Trophy Eyes. They're like a top 10 band for me. These guys out fucking did them, I reckon. They were so fucking good. I loved seeing Boston Manor live. And like I said, possibly their best overall album to date. So coming in at my number 8 is Sundiver by the band Boston Manor.
You know you got me so cold, running round in circles, spinning out of
Coming in at my number 7, I have the album Mantras by Alien Ant Farm. The randomness and surprise of getting a new Alien Ant Farm album this year was fucking insane. I remember being on YouTube, I was like, I kind of feel like listening to Anthology, an album I don't own by Alien Ant Farm, but it's my favourite of theirs. And then I just see that they've got a new song called Fade, and I'm like, oh, it's come out fairly recently. I checked it out, I'm like, I like this, I want to see what else they've done. Lo and behold, a whole fucking new album. I'm like, okay, this is fucking awesome. I've spoken about so many times on my channel, they are such an underrated band, so I won't harp on that again. And again, this album is not amiss in their underrated discography. It's really fucking good. And after all this time listening to this album, it feels almost therapeutic, especially from the vocals. A lot of the songs relating to a failed relationship, so I'm guessing this album was a lot of venting for the band, I guess. And while lots of positives for a weighted return from a band I really like, you know, there could have been a potential misfire with this album after, you know, so many years without new music and whatever. Though this album's not perfect, and to be completely honest, it's probably dropped slightly as the years gone on through this ranking. But I have a soft spot for this band and a bias for this overlooked and underrated group that I just still feel like gets overlooked. You know, so many people know Alien Ant Farm because of their cover of Smooth Criminal. Maybe they know the song Movies or whatever, but they are so much more than that. They've had so many good albums, so many good songs, and I know I said I was going to stop talking about how they're underrated, but this album is a great place to start, even though it's so much later and so new compared to the start of where the discography is. There are genuinely moments of brilliance off this album. Check out songs like Wrong Things, Fade, like I mentioned earlier, What Am I Doing? There are so many good songs here. So coming in at my number 7, here I have Mantras by Alien Ant Farm. Coming in at my number 6, I have the album Was Here by the band Stand Atlantic. Presumably it's meant to be pronounced Stand Atlantic Was Here. But either way, the 4th full-length studio album by the Australian pop-punk band. If you can even say pop-punk anymore, because they've changed their sound quite a bit over time. This is not their strongest or most consistent album, but again, another solid enough entry. Stand Atlantic have always been this really fun band where even if you don't love the album, you can't deny the infectiousness and fun of it. This is probably their heaviest album overall, but it has so much variety. Like, I would almost say you could say it's like almost a dance album as well, which sounds so weird. The heavy examples of this album, you know, you could pick songs like Criminal and 17 as probably the 2 heaviest tracks here. The dance examples that I was meaning, you got Kissing Killer Cobras and Sex on the Beach. And like they have been doing over the past few years, they also expand further into their tech-leaning influence. The best example of that is the track Girls, very tech-heavy on that one. I've said this many times on my channel before when describing the band Red Hook, which I brought up earlier. I've described Red Hook as being like a more amped up, vicious version of Stand Atlantic in a way, because they're just Stand Atlantic but more chaotic. It's almost like Stand Atlantic heard me say that and went, yeah, This Is Us Now, and it's almost like they've topped Red Hook. Like, this album is just so fucking crazy. There's so much variety. Overall, this is easily their most diverse album. You know, you got heavy stuff, you've got tech, you've got dance, like I mentioned before, but you've also still got chill, simple stuff. Songs like Gag, which translates to Girl is a Gun. Love You Anyway is another good example. Rockstar. Rockstar is such a good song that Red Hook actually mentioned that song on their album in the same year. How crazy is that? But coming in at number 6, as I said, fun as always. Here we have the album Was Here by Stand Atlantic. So getting into my top 5 and coming in at my number 5 is the album Toxic by the band Yours Truly. Now, admittedly, I slept on this album for a big portion of the year. Completely my bad. I was at fault. I was familiar with Yours Truly as a band for a while. I've seen them live a handful of times, but just when they were opening for other bands that I was mainly focused on seeing. I knew a few of their previous songs off previous albums and stuff like that, but this was the first album I really took a deep dive into for them. And the more and more I listened to this album, when I eventually got around to it, the more and more it grew on me. And it still shows glimpses of safe songs and structures, which is sort of the reason I didn't take a deep dive earlier and sort of what was stopping me. But when this album goes hard and gets infectious is when its best cards are at hand, for sure. The opening third of this album is a really strong start, and then the closing third is somehow even better with more brooding moments, and it feels like it has a little bit more depth in the closing third. And even though the middle is probably the weakest of the 3/3, it's still relatively solid. Like, overall, this album is really fucking good. Like, as I said, the more and more I listened to it and gave it a chance, I'm like, fuck, how was I sleeping on this album for so long through a big portion of the year? The album brings catchy pop-punk melodies, but provides more depth by featuring heavier styles and guest vocals when needed. And just in the vocal department, just really strong overall by lead vocalist here. I forget her name. I think it's Michaela something. I could be wrong. I should have wrote that down before bringing it up. But a really good album. Like I said, it was just one that I knew I liked just from, first listens and whatever. And I was like, I'll get around to it. Sort of got around to it late, and I'm like, man, I'm kicking myself now because I could have been enjoying this for longer than I have been. But coming in at my number 5, Toxic by the band Yours Truly. Coming in at my number 4, I have the album I Want to Disappear by the band The Story So Far. The Story So Far has one of the most consistent discographies that I have in my collection. All solid, really enjoyable albums, though I'm not sure if any of them would fall into like mind-blowingly good category. Kind of like what I said earlier with Boston Manor, actually, like just a really good, solid discography, but no like album that really blows me away. If I had to pick which band has the better discography of the two, I'd probably go with The Story So Far. But either way, this album has become one of my leading favourites by the band, and you could possibly put that down to recency bias. I'm not saying that's not the case here. I've heard too many people jump on the band saying that they've changed their sound too much, which is kind of true. Like, they have changed their sound, but it's not nearly as drastic as what they make it out to be. To me, I feel like it's a good evolution, but they haven't completely ditched the sound and what they were in the past at all. You have songs like All This Time and Watch You Go, which is like 2 examples of still delivering exactly what they were known for. Like, those 2 songs you could put on any of their previous albums and it wouldn't feel out of place. You got 2 songs like White Shores and I Want to Disappear, acoustic songs that close out the album. Nothing out of place there because, The Story So Far have done a full album that was acoustic songs, so again, nothing that feels out of place to what they've done in the past. The only song that does feel fairly different from most of their past work and most unique to this album is the track Letterman, but I feel like that's a banger. This album is just very easy, it's quick, and again, a strong addition to a already consistent discography and catalogue of music. So coming in at my number 4, I have the album I Want to Disappear by the band The Story So Far. Coming in at my number 3, here I have the album Posthuman Next Gen by the band Bring Me the Horizon. Now this is the album where I was thinking, if you viewers or people watching this list took every album on this ranking and reworked it, this is the album that would probably be most people's number 1. And I may have misled a lot of people after recently saying in a previous video that this album is very good, but there's just something missing for me to say that I love it. And, you know, you probably presume that this album wouldn't rank as high as it is, but here we are. The thing is, the best tracks on this album are fucking outstanding, while there are also a lot of lackluster and even more so, unfortunately, overrated songs. Tracks like Limousine and NA, I just don't get the hype for as much as a lot of other people do. There's songs like Spiritual and Pussy, and it's like, why are those tracks even there? And the thing is, like, it's already admittedly a long runtime. Adding songs in there like that just sort of make it drag out a little bit too. But then on the other side of the coin, when the heavy hitters deliver, like I said, they hit fucking hard. You got songs like Utopia, Top 10 Statues That Cried Blood, Strangers Die For You, just to name like a handful. There's more than that. The bangers just sort of make the lows and highs balance out on this album. There are definitely more bops than flops, I will say that. But there's just something missing to stop me from saying that I love this album, and I can't quite put my finger on it. I do think it falls in the better half of the band's overall discography and lineup. I don't know, maybe to compare it to their album that came previously to this one, Posthuman Survival Horror. That one was shorter, and the bops majorityed over the flops there. This one, Posthuman Next Gen, longer. The bops still outweigh the flops, but there are more lows and more filler tracks for sure. I don't know, I can't quite put my finger on it. Something is missing, I will say that. But like I said, I still love this album. As I said, there was something stopping me from saying love, so I'll take that back. I still really like this album. But yeah, the bangers are good, but there's lows. I don't know, it's a weird one. It's at my number 3. Coming in at my number 2 spot, I have the album Neck Deep by the band Neck Deep. I will always love this band, but their last couple of albums, though I still have really enjoyed them, have definitely drifted away from their peak, or at least in my opinion, their peak. Life's Not Out to Get You is the best modern pop-punk album in my eyes, and it has been a while since they have had an album that has consistently followed the pattern of that album's pop-punk roots. This is probably the closest we have gotten to Life's Not Out to Get You since that album. Still moments of the band's evolved sound through this album. You know, you have tracks like It Won't Be Like This Forever and Moody Weirdo, and maybe still more so an overall polished sound through moments, tracks like Heartbreak of the Century and Take Me With You. But like I said, some of the closest return to their pop-punk peak that we've seen in ages. You've got songs like Sort Yourself Out and This Is All My Fault, just to name a few, that really do feel like songs that you would see off something like Life's Not Out to Get You. The more I've listened to this album through the year, the more I've accepted this album is actually really fucking good. I got over the fact that it's not a carbon copy of Life's Not Out to Get You, and we probably never will get a carbon copy of Life's Not Out to Get You. We probably won't get something on that level or sounding exactly the same again from this band. But this album is pretty close while also being evolved, and to be honest, it does a great job of being both those things. And like I said, it got to a point in the year where I just accepted that, and from one of my favourite modern pop punk bands, this is a really solid entry in their discography and probably one of their better albums over the past couple. So coming in at my number 2, I have the self-titled by Neck Deep, titled Neck Deep. coming in as my number one, my favourite album of 2024, here we have Clancy by 21 Pilots. What to say about Clancy? This album fucking rocks. A return to form after Scaled and Icy, which I will say, Scaled and Icy is a way overhated album. I actually really fucking like it, but it wasn't them in their peak style or creativity. This is back to Blurryface / Trench era, which it not only does feel more immersive and back into the storyline of those two albums, but it feels like the perfect blend of sound and tone between those two albums. I still think Trench is their best album, but at moments when I was listening to this one, it was knocking right on the door. It was really fucking close. Admittedly, though it's close, this album still isn't perfect. Like any album, there are lesser tracks, but there are no tracks that I would deem as horrible or, ones that are like really fucking bad or anything like that. The good songs far outweigh the lesser ones, and even the lower songs, I think, yeah, it's solid, but nothing special, and then I come back to re-listen to it, and I'm like blown away again, and I'm like, fuck no, this song's actually really fucking good. The amount of songs I could already confidently say off this album are in the band's best of all time is scary. Like, this album is such a good return to form, it's crazy. Again, like 21 Pilots are known for, it's such a diverse collection of sounds. The only tone that I'd say is sort of lessened is this album is less poppy. I think that's again because of the reception that Scaled and Icy got, which again is a good album. I stand by that. It is good. It's just not the same tone and what we like from 21 Pilots with like Blurryface and Trench. And like I said, this is like an amalgamation of the two. Really fucking good. Like I said, my favorite album of the year. 21 Pilots are back. My favourite, coming in at number one, Clancy by 21 Pilots. Now, for the life of me, I couldn't remember if I normally do a recap at the end of my ranking series, but since I normally do an outro anyway, I might as well. So coming in at my number 20, I had volumes 1, 2, and 3 of the Plot in News EPs. At number 19, I had Heaven and Hell by Sum 41. At number 18, I had Saviors by Green Day. 17, I had State Champs, self-titled State Champs. 16, I had King of the Mischievous South, Volume 2 by Denzel Curry. 15, I had Rebuild, Repeat by Hockey Dad. 14, I had Sunday Sadness by Amy Shark. 13, I had Supercharged by The Offspring. 12, I had The Death of Slim Shady, Coup de Grace by Eminem. My 11 was Heaven Can Wait by Trash Boat. My number 10 was Shit Yeah, I almost forgot the name of the EP, by Between You and Me. My number 9 was Mutation by Red Hook. Number 8 was Sundiver by Boston Manor. Number 7 was Mantras by Alien Ant Farm. 6 was Here by Stan Atlantic. My number 5 was Toxic by Yours Truly. I always mention a sleeper through the year. This will be my pick for sleeper. Check that one out. Number 4 goes to I Want to Disappear by The Story So Far. 3 went to Posthuman Next Gen by Bring Me the Horizon. 2 went to Neck Deep's self-titled Neck Deep. And my number 1 favourite album of the year was Clancy by 21 Pilots. Alright. Well, there we go, guys. Thank you for sitting through this ranking of my favourite albums of 2024. Like I said, I checked out so much music. This is the hardest I ever dived into prep for putting together a list. There were a few albums that came out late December that I just didn't get enough time to handle with as well, so they potentially could have made it, but like I said, just too late and I had to put this list together. I'm about to go away on a trip, so had to put this list together before I go away and record and edit and all that. So if there are any albums that you feel like I missed or just want to talk about, or if there's any albums that I featured here that you want to talk about and you also really dug, let me know in the comments below, guys. But as always, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you for another video soon. Peace.